Howdy, I'm Ron Claussen from the Castle Rock Historical Society, and I'm a storyteller and one of those people that is a journey hiker, not a destination hiker. Even though today I'm going to talk a little bit about a destination, there's a lot of side branches that you could take off on. And the subject will be all of those ancient people that came over about 18,000 years ago from another continent. And they came across the land bridge, and the interesting thing about that is it was an ice age. So most of the water on the planet was frozen, therefore the water level was down. So I think about what it was like way back then coming across the ice bridge or the land bridge or whatever you wish to call it. Cold. They did not have Uber. They did not have McDonald's, so they've got to think about how they were going to move, what they were going to eat, and be constantly aware of what was around them. It would have been a difficult journey at most, but that's where I go when I think about those folks. They came across and they ran into an obstacle, and it's those mountains off to the west of us. What do you do? Well, it appears that half of them decided to follow the coastline, and they went all the way down to what we now call South America. The other part went across the top, which would be kind of like Canada right now, but they went all the way to the east. And you know some of those tribes from the east, and such books as Last of the Mohicans and stuff like that. So that's basically the journey of those that will end up in Colorado. And they went around the Great Lakes. And the interesting thing about that is those folks going around the Great Lakes are called Algonquin Indians. And that stimulated a thought in my mind because the Arapaho spoke Algonquin. So there must be some kind of a connection there, which leads us to believe that yes, they came down, they went across Canada, they cruised around the Great Lakes, then they headed down toward Missouri and some of those places in the middle of the US. And here's another interesting thing that got me going off on one of those divergences. Indians back in that time, that's when they began agriculture. They started digging and farming and all of that, which changed their lifestyle, their culture quite a bit, because if you're going to be planting a crop, you've got to be around a long time. You plant in the spring and you harvest in the fall. So they ended up not really being those people that walk around a lot. They're farmers, civilization started, some of those kinds of things. All of a sudden they started to experience deadly diseases, not COVID-19, but they were experiencing some really bad diseases. And the thought is that since they were all living in close proximity, they were all staying in the same place for 6, 9, 10 months a year, sanitation became a problem, and all of a sudden they became less healthy than the hunter-gatherers, the small family groups that had come across the land bridge. So all of a sudden their whole lifestyle changed. Well, the folks that ended up here in Colorado, they really didn't do that. They kept on going. Have you ever tried to farm out here in Colorado? It's awfully dry. The dirt is awfully hard. If you're in the John Deere tractors, John Deere made his fortune by coming up with steel plows to kind of bust up the prairie soil and things like that. So that's how John got his start, because of the soil and the dry conditions and stuff. But the folks that came to Colorado, they were hunter-gatherers anyway, and they didn't much care for farming and things like that. And as we go along and think about the tribes that came in, When there were small family groups, there were no tribes, there were no nations, none of those things that you normally think of today. There was a family group that lived over in Castlewood Canyon in a rock shelter or sort of a cave. And we've done some archaeological digs over there and identified that was about 5,000 years ago. So they were still family units back in that time. And what was going on, these family units would go to a rendezvous. And at that time, they would perhaps trade sons and daughters so that there would be an intermixing and the population would become healthy. And they would trade. If you look at some of the artifacts down here, they came from Pipestone, Minnesota, Algonquin Indians. So all of a sudden now there's all of this trading going on. The Indians at that time, they were cruising up to Greeley, where they have found artifacts with Columbian mammoths. And those are big, huge mammoths. And they were around here. And there's digs that I've been to up in Greeley where they did that, buffalo kills and stuff like that. Lamb Spring around here also is a very old archaeological site where they found a number of old animal bones along with artifacts. So this area is kind of rich with people that have lived here for a very long time. But most people are more familiar with the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, the Comanche, and all of them. When you look at the map of the Indian succession migration movements around this area, the first thing I thought of when I saw that was it looks like Europe. You know, you see Europe and here comes these invaders, these people came in and shoved others out and things like that. And that's what it was like in Colorado up until about 1870 when the Indians were all rounded up and put on a reservation. And when I look at the map, the one thing that really struck me is where the Utes were, the Colorado Mountain Utes. When I tried to figure out the topography and where their range was, they were above 9,500 feet. They were there. They never moved. Nobody pushed them out. Why? It's probably cold up there. You know, think about it. So all of a sudden now, the Utes have been here for a very, very long time, and they've been here while everybody else came and went. And the Utes were tough people. If you start thinking about what they would do in the spring, they would leave Spirit Lake up in the mountains, Grand Lake and all of that, and they would hike up and over the Continental Divide and come down to Estes Park and places like that, all in one day. Think about it. You're taking your home, everything you own, and you're hiking up over the Continental Divide, and you're doing it in a day. Think how tough you have to be to do that. But that's what they did. They occupied all of Colorado up until 9,500 feet west of there. And when you look at some of the stuff that's hanging around my neck, I had a Colorado Mountain Ute, and she gave me the medicine bag, and she gave me all these glass beads, which were gold to those folks back in that time. It was great. She died here a couple years ago, and in the around 1950, she was taken off away from the tribe and brought down to Denver and put into an orphanage. And the goal was they were going to Americanize her. And so she lived there until she was adopted. And then we hung out together, and we were cowboys and Indians, and we did programs and presentations quite often and things like that up until she was getting really sick. So that's just a quick, short story about Indians and the people that came down here to Colorado to inhabit it. There are so many little branches that you could take off and spend the rest of your life trying to investigate and learn more about. But hopefully this was something that'll give you something to think about, something to enjoy, and maybe even do a little research. Thanks. Have a good day.